Heyo. So when I left off in the last video, um, I had just finished talking about how I got started cutting. Not really how, because I don't really think that's necessary. If you're going through it, you have your own how. So I could talk about it. I have no problem doing it if anybody wanted to know. Um, but I think for the purpose of this project, it's not really necessary. Um, and my suicide attempt. So I would like to pick up a little bit after that. I do want to talk about my attempts at getting help, how successful I was with which methods, and kind of the obstacles that I faced, how I overcame them, and all of that. But really, I don't want to skip over like really the worst part of, I don't want to say of my life, but it was definitely the darkest time of my life. And I did a lot of learning through that time and afterwards, and I don't think I would have if it hadn't been for that time. No, you have to hit rock bottom before you can start moving up again, and that was my rock bottom. And because I don't want to make light of any of this. I don't want to take away any of the gravity of what anybody is going through, but I'm also not a Dr. Phil special, so you have to take responsibility for at a certain point, really, for your own well-being. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that it's different for everybody. You're going to be in a different place. You're going to have different methods. Different things might affect you than what affected me. I talked a little bit about my anxiety, and I'll talk about that later again too, because it kind of fucked off for a little while. When I did attempt suicide, I really, really felt alone. Like, I know that sounds silly to say, because why else would you? But I remember very specifically that day and the day afterwards. It's not something that I think I'll ever forget, and I don't necessarily wish to either. I I was really, really sick the next day. I won't go over what exactly my process looked like, but I will tell you that I did try just taking a whole shit ton of medications. I did try to overdose. I was so sick. I woke up at probably like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I spent the whole entire day throwing up or trying not to throw up. The day afterwards really sticks with me because, like I mentioned previously, my sisters and I weren't close at that point, and it was in the wintertime. I was upstairs getting sick, and one of my sisters was super pissed at me because I kept asking for more water, because every time I tried to get up and go get a glass of water, I would throw up, and so I just wasn't leaving the bathroom. And she got mad at me for that. So it made me resent that it didn't work, that I failed, of course, which makes it harder on yourself, for you to be harder on yourself like that, because it's one more thing that I couldn't get right. And I know how silly that is now, but in the moment, that's really all I was thinking. And then my mom had us go, we were supposed to go buy a Christmas present. I'm sure it was for my dad, just because of the store that we went to. And I couldn't even go in the store. I had to stay outside because I just couldn't stop throwing up, and nobody gave a shit. Like, people were mad at me for being sick, and they didn't know, obviously, because I wasn't gonna be like, yo, guess why I'm sick. But it just reinforced that I really was alone. I didn't have anybody who gave a shit. And because I failed, I knew that I wasn't going to do it again. Like, especially not that method. And I know I'm laughing. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I hope you know that. It just is so insane. So insane. Can't not laugh. It's weird thinking back, like, my sister and I are so close now. We were each other's maid of honor at our weddings this year. And she is like the best aunt that my kids could have. And if I ever needed anything, she's the first person that I would go to. But she was the one who was pissed off at me for needing me, for me needing her to get me water, and that I wouldn't go into the store with her to get this Christmas present because I'm sure she thought that I was lying about how sick I was. But that awful feeling of being sick all day, I knew that was the last time, that it was not going to happen again. So I just had kind of committed myself to sticking with the cutting, as ludicrous as that sounds. And it went on for quite some time. I remember when I ran out of space on my arms, I started cutting my legs, and we were in gym class, and my shorts came up. We were doing like weightlifting or something like that, and my shorts came up and showed some fresh cuts, and my friend Rachel was like, "Whoa, dude, what happened to your legs? Like, that's crazy." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I went for a run last night, and I was wearing shorts, and I went through these prickle bushes, and they scraped my legs all up." And I was like, "Yeah, and I tripped, and you should see my back. Like, it's just terrible." I made up this huge lie. And previously, like a couple years before, she had actually been my best friend. Got drunk for the first time with her, so felt like shit for lying to her also, which makes things worse. Like, every bad decision that you make when you're in that state of mind, and especially when it's a constant, it just piles on and amplifies. It's like when people say having one kid going to two isn't like going to two, it's like going to three, and then you add on a third and it's like going to five. Like, it just it's a lot more than just one more thing on top of another. And of course, she wasn't the only person that I was lying to, so for every person that I lied to, I felt worse and worse and worse and worse. And that went on for like I'd say probably 6 months or so. Finding new places to cut because they just weren't healing fast enough. Looking back at it, it's like, well, why didn't you take that as a sign? You know, like, maybe you should get some help because this is clearly a problem. But for me, the problem was that I just didn't have, I had to hide it. Like, I didn't have enough clothes to just cover up all the time. My problem was that winter was ending. And what was I going to do then? My problem was that even when I tried to end my life, nobody gave a shit. You know, that's how I felt. I know that's not true. Nobody knew. So how could they? But that's not abnormal. It's not healthy. I know that it's not healthy. I knew then that it wasn't healthy, but I didn't feel like I had any other choice. So this one time in our house, my sister and I both had bedrooms downstairs, and there was a bathroom downstairs. And I don't remember going into the bathroom. I don't remember like prepping. All I remember is like coming to and looking down at my arm and realizing that I should probably get some stitches. And that really scared the shit out of me. Cutting myself was never about suicide. I know that sounds especially ridiculous because I do have a suicide attempt in my past, but cutting myself was never, ever, ever about suicide. And that's a common misconception I really think needs to be addressed. And I'll get into a couple of those in a little bit. There's a couple that kind of piss me off. But looking down at myself and realizing, like, I don't even remember doing this. I just did this, and I didn't know, and it's so bad. Like, it's so bad. Scared the shit out of me to the point where I did get help. And it wasn't easy. It was not easy at all. But that dissociative episode, it saved my life. It really saved my life because I didn't want to die. I wanted to fix myself. I needed help. in learning how to do that, because clearly what I was doing wasn't working, and it wasn't healthy. And because I knew that the whole entire time, I think that's why I was able to see the seriousness of this dissociative episode, because it was always there in the back of my mind, like, this is stupid, like, you shouldn't do this. But I did it anyways because it was just, in the moment, such a relief. But at that point, I knew I needed a long-term solution. And I really hope that if you guys have those moments, that you take them seriously. Your gut will talk to you more often than you're probably noticing. Your brain will try to trip you up sometimes, like, especially when you're dealing with chemicals and hormones and things like that. Your brain is kind of a dumbass sometimes. And if you keep that in the back of your mind, I really think you're looking out for yourself the best that you can. Because our brains tell us all kinds of things that just don't make any sense. And I could list some of those things, but I'm sure if you're watching this, then you've experienced that yourself, so you don't need me to. I went to my mom because I was scared. I didn't trust her. I told her that I didn't want her in any appointments. But I kind of suspected that if I went to a doctor and I was like, yo, check this out, they would call my parents anyways. And so I was like, well, fuck, like, I might as well just skip the line. So made an appointment with my family doctor, who got me an appointment with a counselor. And he wasn't a bad counselor. But I think I was, I don't want to say this to be an asshole, I was just smarter than him for the situation. I'm a people reader, an empath, whatever you want to call it. And I know this is not an uncommon thing also. When you're sitting in a chair and you're talking to a professional, they kind of give you hints, body language, whatever, about what they want to hear, as opposed to what your truth is. And a lot of times they're not there to hear your truth. They're there to add you to their pile of successes. And I knew what he wanted to hear. I would crack jokes. I would be, I would pretend to be learning, willing. I would give in just enough, but also kind of dig my heels in a little bit. I didn't want to let him know that I knew that this was going to be over in a month, because I knew all the right answers. And I think a lot of counselors are that way. They want you to be fixed, and it's not that easy. So whether you're, we're all buddy in the office, that doesn't mean shit. Like, we can get along and I'm not going to open up to you, but you're going to think I'm opening up to you. Sorry, but that's self-preservation at its best. It takes a lot to find someone who you feel comfortable enough to share all of your crap with. Like, this is not just crap. It's like nuclear waste, like toxic shit that burns your soul. You think I'm just going to tell anybody? I'm not going to tell just anybody. I mean, now I can tell all y'all whatever. I don't really care. But at the time, when your whole world is crashing down around you and you feel like you're already on fire, I'm not going to tell you shit, So finding the right person to talk to when you live in the North, when you live in a small community. I was actually talking with someone the other day through work about this. She was in the United States. I'm in Canada. And finding resources here is not hard. It's not. I could walk into a doctor's office and be like, I need counseling. And he'd be like, okay, cool. Here's a phone number. But finding someone to jive with for real, where you're on the same wavelength, that you trust legitimately, and who is willing to listen to you. People like me, we do our research most of the time. And that's funny, because I'll tell you why in a little while. We look up things. We don't just like Google diagnose ourselves, but we read into things. We teach ourselves. If I don't have to go, if I don't have to go somewhere to be fixed and I can just do it myself, I'm gonna do that. Uh, so to find someone that you jive with and who will actually listen to your theories, thoughts, and not necessarily self-diagnoses, but your opinions on what you think is going on with you without looking at you like you're insane, is hard to do. That's what's really hard for me here. Whereas the person that I was talking to is saying that it's really hard just to find the resources. So I don't know if it's a difference in countries in healthcare, or if it really is just that specific area compared to my specific area, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure what it is, but I really think that more people who speak out like this, the more normalized it will be, the more open it will be to discuss these things, not just in the symptoms, but in the fix of it. And that's really what I'm hoping for. So that counselor did like pretty much nothing for me. And I just kind of decided on my own that even though I couldn't figure out how to cope with this stuff, like this mass amount of stuff that was just making me feel like I had no other choice but to cut myself, I decided that because I couldn't, it's not just that I didn't want to, I couldn't go through another episode like that where I risked dying, really. I just decided not to deal with any of it, so I just shut off. I stopped cutting, I stopped caring, I stopped giving a shit about anything, honestly. And it's not funny. It's not funny at all. It's just insane. And I'll probably say that a lot. It's just so unbelievable. The processes that I went through, like to not die, but to not have to feel anything when the bad outranks the good is just, and it's I don't want to say it's common. Like, I have not done any research on this. I really am going by personal experience because of my experience with especially counselors, because I've talked to my share of counselors who sound like they're just reading out of a book. They've never been there. They've gone through the schooling. I'm sure they're like qualified, educationally speaking, but it's not the same thing as having been there. And I've talked with people who have been there, and when they have just a little bit of insight, it can make a world of difference. But because this guy was not one of those guys, I just decided on my own, I can't do this. I won't do this. I'm just gonna be a zombie, basically. So I went through the next few years kind of just doing that, which is terrible because within the next few years, at 16, I got pregnant. My boyfriend at the time was 9 years older than me. Bad idea. Like, hello. And because I just shut off, that relationship did not go well. I couldn't even remember most of it now if I really, really tried. There were a few things that I could outline, a couple of arguments that we had that I could remember, but I just really shut myself in my house and turned off. That's really, so the depression kind of went away. Well, I just shut it off. It was there. I was choosing to ignore it. But everything else was really in full bloom. I started getting really bad panic attacks. That was maybe before I knew the term, actually. We had moved down to Vancouver Island with our son. He was not even a year old yet. And from there, I never really left my house. I got really, really fat. I would wear sweatpants and men's shirts. He would try to get me to go out for walks and whatever, and I couldn't bring myself to go outside. After I left him is when I found out there's a term for this. My agoraphobia got really bad. It's not the worst that it had that it ever got. That was later. But I was actually terrified of answering my phone. I was terrified of picking up the phone, even to hear the dial tone. Anytime I had my son with me, it wasn't as bad. I had something to focus on and just kind of shut everybody else out around me. And I couldn't always identify my triggers. Sometimes I could go to Safeway and go shopping. Totally fine. Other times I would make it to the car and I would have to run back. Like I could not figure out the pattern. I couldn't figure out what was setting me off and what wasn't. Why sometimes it was okay, why sometimes it wasn't. But that was my life for a good solid year. And I never told anybody. I didn't really think much of it. I knew I had always been this way. I knew this was just who I was. So I thought there's got to be other people out there like this. Like, it's clearly not a big deal. If other people are doing this, I'll just keep doing this. And I realized that a lot of it was because I was just shut off. I didn't have any processing going on. I wasn't able to identify and treat whatever the trigger was. If something was causing me to worry, why was it causing me to worry? What could I do to fix that? There was no processing going on. So it just, something scary appeared and I ran. That's the simplest way to put it. And that went on. I left my boyfriend. I had seen a lawyer. My son was 2. And the lawyer actually recommended that I just take my son and go. And I didn't listen to her. I trusted him. He said he would never keep my son from me. So I let him take him for what was supposed to be a 2-week visit. And he's now 18. So that really threw me into a spiral. I got served with custody papers, the day before he was supposed to bring him back to me. And I was completely blindsided. Completely blindsided. I never would have done that to him. I had the option. I had the chance. Everybody told me he was going to do it. And I didn't listen. Custody battles. Having the person who you thought was a good enough person to be your child's other parent, hide from you, hang up the phone when your son's trying to talk to you. And legitimately, he did hide from me. We were in a car. We saw him come through town. I turned around to follow him, pulled in front of him, motioned for him to pull over. He said he was gonna, and then he passed a semi-truck on a double solid line and hid from us. Wouldn't let me see my son. So, of course, that kind of did me in for quite a while. It was like all the processing, all the emotions, all the stuff that I had turned off, they just all came back all at the same time. And there was just anger. My whole life was anger. I actually did not ever cut again. After that, that really prompted me, basically kicked me hard into fixing myself. Because if I wanted my son, that's what I had to do. I had to make sure I was the best person. And I obviously fucked up along the way. But also a big part of that is having a co-parent not really willing to co-parent with you. I look back and I think, why didn't he make me go to a doctor? Why was he okay with me staying at home, not showering, wearing the same clothes day after day, being miserable? Why didn't he say something? Why didn't he help me? He was supposed to love me. I'm the mother of his child. Why are you using this against me now when you enabled me? You didn't help me. You were supposed to help me. I had no idea that this was as bad as it was at the time. You're the one person who was supposed to help me and you're not. Now you're just screwing me over. And it was hard for me too, because I really hadn't worked before that. I got pregnant at 16. I'd had a couple like small jobs, whatever. And I was finding it really hard with my anxiety, with my agoraphobia, and the stress always makes things worse. My son didn't want to see me because I had moved away when we split up. Um, and when I got served the custody papers, when the papers were filed, because my son was with his dad when they were filed, they gave him automatic interim custody. So he got primary residence until court was settled. So I I drove down there and I was like, I need to see him. You know, like I drove 1,400 kilometers. I need to see my son. And from there it was just a fight the whole time for everything. I couldn't afford child support. I lived in a bachelor suite with my sister. Was like, we were poorer than poor. And he would come over and he didn't want to stay with me because he didn't see me very often, which killed me. Like, if anybody's ever experienced when your kid doesn't want you, it's the worst, like literally the worst. And living in that city was awful. Honestly, I hated it. I lived in Victoria. I used to really love it. I really, really hate it now. I've been back. I've moved back there, actually. I lived back there for a little while again after my daughter was born. And I just couldn't stay there. There was a lot of negativity surrounding in and available in Victoria. And because I really didn't know anything else, like that really had been my life, I kind of gravitated towards it and I didn't really know how to get away from it. So it was really hard for me to be there and not have a support system. So I made the decision to move away again. And of course, that really impacted not just how much I saw my son. I mean, honestly, I saw him a lot more after I moved than when I lived there. His dad just wouldn't cooperate. Felt like I had no right to him. He felt like I had no right to him because I didn't pay child support. I ended up being diagnosed with agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, general anxiety disorder, and bipolar 2. If you've read my blog on lifeuncensored.ca, I have one dedicated to the doctor who told me bipolar 2 is not a thing. So it is, just so you know, it is. Which I actually didn't learn until about a year ago. So from the time I was 19 until the time I was 34, I believed that my diagnosis was not a thing. My doctor said to me, you're bipolar or you're not. There is no number 2. So that's why I think it's really funny when I was like, yeah, we Google things and we look things up, and yeah, because I didn't. The internet wasn't really big like it is now. I mean, it was there, obviously, but it wasn't like, yeah, Google that. I'm going to Google this. Oh, Google that. You know, like that just wasn't, you didn't say that. So I went a very long time thinking that there was something wrong with me and that it just was a big fat unknown. I've always been ultra sensitive. I have a little bit of a hypersensitivity disorder, you know, like with sounds and smells, emotions, like all that kind of stuff. You know, like certain scents make me sick, things give me a headache, whatever. But that bipolar 2 thing was kind of eye-opening. At the time, I was actually really offended because the psychiatrist who diagnosed me with bipolar 2, in her report, described me as being unkempt. And that really bothered me because I wasn't, in my eyes anyways. I was freshly showered. I had on makeup. My hair was brushed. I had on clean clothes. I didn't smell. I don't know where she got it from. I would love to know why she made that note, actually, to this day. Sure, there was actually a reason for it. I just don't know what it is. So, trying to get help for that, like, wasn't even an option for me because I didn't think it was a thing. My doctor, and I was actually with my son's dad during this time when I went to my doctor and I was like, yeah, I was diagnosed with this last year and blah, 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 blah. So after we split up and all the court things ensued, it was just like opportunity after opportunity to make bad mistakes and to not get help for myself. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like I'm 20, whatever. I'm having a good time. If my son doesn't want to see me, I'm not going to force him to see me. But at the same time, like, this super sucks. We went to court a couple of times for like, vacation times and whatever. But it always ate at me. I never had the money, the resources, or like, I'll be honest, if I went to court against him, how much would my mental health problems be held against me? I don't know. One of my lawyers actually told me that there's no point because they'll take one look at my arms and be like, well, she's clearly not mentally healthy. So why would we give you custody of your child? Like, we're not going to endanger your child. So my mental health played into that as well. They kind of fed off of each other, which is awful. It's a cycle that happens all the time. When the court sides with any parent against the other one, it's always going to stress you out. It's always going to be depressing. It's always going to impact your mental state. So there's a vicious cycle. So I tried just to give him his space and support him in what he wanted to do. My son, that is. He does still live there. I've always opened up and said, like, you can live here anytime. I'll drive down and get you right now. But he's never heard the story about how he ended up with his dad. I doubt he'll watch this because it's not that I don't feel like he has a right to know. I just don't want to ruin what him and his dad have now. While I don't believe that his father was a very good person after we split up and going through this, I think that he has changed. I think that he has grown. And I don't want to damage that. I don't want to hurt my son just for the sake of telling the story. If he does watch this and he has questions, that's something that I'll address when that comes. But he's an 18-year-old boy. He's got a girlfriend. He's got 2 jobs. He's going to school again in the fall. Like, he's an amazing person. His dad and his stepmom have done an amazing job. I won't deny that whatsoever. I'm so glad that he had his stepmom because she's awesome. She really is. She's super rad. He's healthy, like, mentally speaking. I think he's pretty well-rounded. He definitely, even though he hasn't spent the majority of his life with me and his sister and my family, he definitely is one of us. There is no denying that whatsoever. And he'll tell you too. So I will continue. I'll continue to do that. I hate that I don't have a lot of experiences with him that I've gotten to have with my daughter. But I do feel like I did right by him, not making a big mess in a custody battle. I really do think, especially when it comes to the fact that he's a boy and the most influential parent you have is the same-sex parent. And I really think he really did benefit from that. I know sometimes him and his dad have fights and he texts me about it, and it's kind of funny because it's just like normal kid stuff, right? But every kid has that, right? Because it's normal. And there have been times where I've pissed him off. It's just part of being a person. So, he's always welcome to come here. I always tell him that. I embarrassed him at graduation. It's my job. I'm allowed. I made him smile. It was awesome. Anyways, I digress. Trying to find help for bipolar 2 on my own, blah, 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 as I'd like to consider myself a functioning adult. I was agoraphobic for quite some time. After my daughter was born, it started getting easier. I did see a couple of counselors. None of us ever hit it off. I tried and tried and tried and tried some more. I tried different medications over the years. They just weren't for me. They never really worked out. I gave them a shot and it just made me feel worse than it did better. So they never lasted. And that was kind of okay with me. I was okay just existing, having my family, whatever. And then I moved back home to smithers, and I kind of came out of my shell. I hadn't even been there for a week, and I had a job, hired on the spot. I had one job I really, really, really wanted, so I just kept applying there. Finally got hired there. Then I had 2 jobs, and then I got offered full-time at the job I really wanted, so I quit the other job, and I was like moving up, and I got married, and that was a big fat disaster, and that'll be a whole other video. But I just stopped. I can't even say I stopped worrying, because I hate when people are like, well, just stop worrying and stop stressing about it. Oh, well, thanks. Like, I never thought of that. Oh, you're afraid to go outside? Oh, don't even worry about it. Oh, okay, I'm fine now. Oh, you're sad? Oh, just cheer up. Just. I can't stand it when people say just. And that falls into those misconceptions, right? And I'll touch on those before I forget, because that happens quite a bit with me. Misconceptions about cutting and depression. If you're watching this and you haven't experienced it firsthand, you might have some of these misconceptions. You might not. And even if you've gone through some of this, you still might have some of those misconceptions. I can't give you a number. I don't want to quote a number because I will have made it up. But a large percentage of people who are self-harmers are not interested in suicide. They're not doing it as a lead up to suicide. They're not. Google it. The other one is that they're doing it for attention. Most of the time, again, I won't make up a number. I won't lie to you. Most of the time, we don't want you to know. We don't. You're going to look at us all sad and feel sorry for us, and then you're going to tell us we're crazy, and then you're going to stop being our friend. So we don't want you to know. We're not doing it for attention. We want you to not know. 100%. I think those are the main 2 misconceptions as far as cutting goes. And depression, there's a lot. There's a lot of misconceptions around depression. You can be depressed and not have depression. Everybody has depressed moments. Like, that's life. Shit's hard. Shit's rough. Shit gets messy. And you can't just snap out of it. It's not something where you're like, oh, okay, I'll go out in the sunshine and draw a rainbow and then I'm fine again. There's no like tricking yourself into not being depressed. So there are steps that we take. I've outlined them actually in a blog with a couple of suggestions to help get yourself out of a funk. But that's not true depression. It's not that fixable. It's not that easy. So I guess I kind of need a light in here. Yeah, you can't just snap out of it. I'm not just going to feel better because you tell me to feel better. Like, it's not in my head. I mean, it's my brain, but it's not in my head. I'm not making this up. I don't want to feel this way. Do you think feeling this way is fun? No, it's not. So don't tell me that. I'm sure if you just typed into Google things not to say to someone with depression, things not to say to someone with anxiety, you'd find a whole list.